Hello there ladies and gentlemen, it's ASCII here for NerdTV, welcoming you back to Hearthstone. Today it is just after the January patch and I've got some new decks that I've been working on that are going to take advantage of the new changes. They're decks that are still going to work and be strong in the meta, so plenty of these will be worth checking out. This first one is probably my favourite, it's the Unleash the Giants Hunter deck. It works by combining the changes to Unleash the Hounds and some other cards to basically allow you to play out giants very early. Now the giants are 8/8 creatures that have sort of interesting costing. So the mountain giant costs 1 less for each other card in your hand, and the sea giant costs 1 less for each other minion on the battlefield. So basically you're going to be using cards such as Snake Trap and Unleash the Hounds to flood the board with minions, allowing you to play very early sea giants. You're also going to take advantage of that flooding of the board with minions by having the Starving Buzzard out for extra card draw to allow you to play the mountain giant very early, and also sacrificing those minions when you've got the Scavenging Hyena out so you can buff him up at the same time. So he's going to get buffed up massively as you sacrifice the snakes and the hounds, and you're going to end up with lots of very powerful minions out on the field. I mean, this deck has, normally most games you're probably going to end up with 3 minions with over 8 attack on the board, so that's a pretty strong play, and you're going to start to get those minions out from about turn 4 or 5. Now let's go through what is in the deck. First of all, we have Arcane Shot. This is basically in here for a little bit of removal. If things start getting out of hand and the enemy's playing out just too many minions and you're starting to take too much damage, don't be afraid to kill them off. Now, you want to let them build up a few minions because you want Unleash the Hounds to be effective. However, if they get too many or they're too strong, you need to start killing some off. So Arcane Shot's in here for that. Next up we have Tracking. This look at the top 3 cards of your deck and draw one and discard the others. Now Tracking's great to draw at the beginning of the game in the mulligan, because if you get hold of that you can then basically pick what cards you want. So you basically, what you really want to get in your hands, Unleash the Hounds, a Starving Buzzard is sort of the minimum combination. That's going to allow you to flood the board with minions and get good card draw, which is going to get you closer to getting the Sea Giant and the Mountain Giant out. Now other good cards to get hold of early game are the Snake Trap, the Wolfe and the Scavenging Hyena. We'll talk about those in just a moment, but basically you can use all those cards in combination to get some really big plays. Don't really worry too much about anything over 3 costings. All these sort of come in the game a little bit later on, and just fill a few gaps to help you with a little bit of removal, more card draw, and definitely ignore the Savannah high main in the mulligan. But yeah, Tracking's a really good card to pull because then you can pretty much guarantee you're going to have the cards you need by the time you get to turn 4. So the Wolfe I just mentioned gives all your other beasts +1 attack. Now this can be incredibly powerful if you've played out a lot of hounds or you have the snake out, because you're going to double all their damage and then suddenly they're trading very efficiently. So not only are you going to be getting efficient trades, you're also going to be buffing up the Scavenging Hyena. So really good combination there. So the Snake Trap, I mentioned this a couple of times, it's an epic card. Secret, when one of your minions is attacked, it summons a 1/1 snake. So this is important, it only triggers when one of your minions is attacked. So you can in fact play this out on turn 2 if you're not planning on playing any more minions out for a little bit. So you can play out the Snake Trap, follow up on turn 3 by playing the Starving Buzzard, perhaps even coin into Unleash the Hounds so you get a load of card draw there, burn all the hounds, and then you could even have the Snake Trap trigger on the next turn so you're going to draw even more cards, so you've suddenly refilled your hand completely. Do be careful, it can go over the top, you can end up with problems where you're actually going to be burning cards and wasting them. You don't want that to happen, so make sure you're counting up what's going to happen. But yeah, Snake Trap's a really good way to get early game card draw combined with the Starving Buzzard. Now, Unleash the Hounds is sort of the key card in this deck. For each enemy minion, summon a 1/1 hound with charge. So turn 4 is basically when this is really going to come in for an average game. Turn 3, if you had the coin, you can Starving Buzzard and Unleash the Hounds. If you've also got, say you got to turn 5 and you coin, you can Unleash the Hounds, Starving Buzzard and Scavenging Hyena, or if you're lucky enough to already have the Scavenging Hyena out, you're going to get some serious value out of that combination, because then you're going to end up with a very powerful Scavenging Hyena out in the field, and you can often, in that sort of situation, play a free Sea Giant or a very low cost Sea Giant as well, and that's really useful. Nat Pagal in here, but you don't necessarily need to have him. At the end of your turn, you have a 50% chance to draw a card. So Nat Pagal's in here because he's a creature that isn't really going to get focused. People don't tend to actually kill him, which is quite useful. So he's going to stay out on the field for a while. So you can play him out on turn 2 or turn 1, and he's probably not going to go anywhere for a little while, which means you're going to get more chance of getting that Sea Giant out, and you're going to get better value a little bit later on, and of course it's going to provide you card draw for out, which is going to get you closer to the Mountain Giant. So he's not required, you can quite easily replace him with anything else, but it's nice to have him in there if you do have him unlocked. Scavenging Hyena, I've mentioned this a few times, whenever a friendly beast dies, gain +2/+1. So It only applies to beasts, but the hounds are beasts, the snakes are beasts, and that's mainly the things you're going to be sacrificing. And the Scavenging Hyena is going to get absolutely out of control with that. You can buff him up massively and make him very difficult to get rid of. And when people are faced with a choice between getting rid of a Scavenging Hyena and the giants and even Savannah Highmanes out in the field, they're not really going to know what to hit, so you're going to get really good value. Especially if they go for the Highmane first, because then you're going to get even more buffs up on the Hyena. Starving Buzzard, again, this is one of the most important cards in this deck. Whenever you summon a beast, draw a card. So, of course, I've mentioned before, this is going to trigger Unleash the Hounds and Snake Trap for the most value, but of course it's also going to work with any other beast in your deck. Animal Companion, summon a random beast companion. This card is in here just because it's pretty damn strong. Pretty much anything you summon up is going to help. If you put up the taunts, that's going to be quite useful because it means you can have your Starving Buzzard and your Scavenging Hyena behind that if they're still weak and give them time to buff up. And it's also going to force the enemy to attack a minion. So if you happen to have a Snake Trap out and the Starving Buzzard out, Animal Companion is quite a good play because that way they're going to have, if you pull the taunt, they're going to attack into it and it's going to trigger, and they're quite likely to attack into whatever you pull up anyway. The other minions you could potentially put out this are going to buff up all your creatures. That's of course going to work very well with the hounds or the snakes. It's going to give them +1 attack, or the other card is a charge, which is going to be quite useful for rushing the enemy down or clearing something off their board. Kill command, deal 3 damage, or if you have a beast, deal 5 damage instead. You're quite likely to have beasts out in the field, so that's going to work out quite well for you. And this is just generally a really good way to clear creatures off the field if they played out a taunt or something like that, something you don't want to have to sacrifice a load of minions into. If they've got a taunt out and lots of weak stuff behind, you can use kill command to remove it from the field. And it's also a good way to get some direct damage to finish off the enemy hero towards the end of the game. Harvest Golem in here because he's just quite hard to remove. So this is another way to get yourself a minion out of the field that's probably going to hang around a bit and give you more chance of getting that sea giant out. And the multi-shot, deal 3 damage to 2 random enemy minions. Only one of these in the deck. It's just a random piece of removal in here. I was running into issues where I was ending up with the board. Their side of the board was getting very full. Because I hadn't cleared it early, they were managing to play out quite a few minions. So I found a little bit of removal around turns 4 and 5 was useful in case I'd run into issues. Often I was able to get my combos triggering on turn 3, especially if I had the coin already. I'd get the combo popping then, and then a little bit later on, sort of turns 5, turns 6, it's nice to have a bit of removal there so you can actually clear some of the creatures off the field without sacrificing all of your side of the board. The Cult Master, whenever one of your minions dies, draw a card. Now, this isn't certainly not a required card by any means. I ran into a few issues where occasionally I wasn't pulling the Starving Buzzard, and that was causing problems for the whole deck. I wasn't getting enough card draw, so I couldn't get the Mountain Giant, and I wasn't getting enough options so I could play out the Sea Giant. I wasn't getting my Snake Traps and the Unleash the Hounds in my hand, so I couldn't get all those minions out in the field, so I couldn't play the Sea Giant. Now, the Cult Master went in because if I'm having those issues by turn 4, I can play out the Cult Master and take value of having minions already out in the field and just sacrifice them all for the card draw. So it's a way to do that. Obviously it synergizes very well as well with the Scavenging Hyena, so if you're just sacrificing stuff, that's a good way to do it. Explosive Shot in here for the same reason as multi-shot, just a way to remove minions from the field into the slightly later game. You're really not... Occasionally you need these cards on turn 4 and 5. It's fairly unusual to be in that situation, but occasionally you do. Normally you're going to need them a little bit later in the game. You can normally survive a little bit well enough before then, because you're going to be pulling those Unleash the Hounds and the Snake Trap. That's going to give you some good AoE potential, because you can fling those minions out wherever you need to and pick everything off. But not having any removal in there was an issue when they were playing out really big powerful creatures into the later game, and occasionally you couldn't get through them, especially if they were a taunt or something like that. If they had Divine Shield or something, it became an issue. Savannah Highmane, Death Rattle summoned the 2/2 Hyena in here pretty much because it's just a really good value card, and it's another big threat to play out in the field if you haven't managed to get enough giants out and stuff like that. It's a good way to play a minion out. And lastly, our 2 giants. So the Sea Giant works by costing 1 less for each other minion on the field. Now you can very often get this minion out on turn 4, there's very good potential for that. If not, turns 5 or 6, it's probably going to be out very easily. Often by turn 6 you're going to be looking at having 2 giants out in fact, if not a giant of Savannah Highmane or a giant and a buffed up Scavenging Hyena. The final card is the Mountain Giant, costs 1 less for each of the other cards in your hand, so that's going to synergize that really well with the Starving Buzzard as I mentioned earlier. So that is the Unleash the Giants deck. It's fairly simple to understand. You're just going to be playing, you're going to be looking for those good draws. So you're going to need the Starving Buzzard, you're going to need the Unleash the Hounds, Snake Trap, that kind of thing. Play those out, get extra value from them with Timberwolf, make sure you're getting the cards with tracking. You've got some good solid removal throughout the deck in the later game, and you've got some really big powerful minions going to play out. And so far this deck's been working out incredibly well. I've hardly lost a game with it. It's so powerful and really good fun to play. It does run into issues if you're playing against another hunter who's running a deck involving Unleash the Hounds, because you're going to have quite a lot of minions out in the field at times, and you can take advantage of that. Also watch out for things like Lore Walker Cho, because he can of course then pull cards like Unleash the Hounds and Snake Trap and stuff, and then he'll actually be able to cast those back on you to get the same sort of effect. So watch out for anyone who's playing a similar sort of deck, but apart from that, this is really solid. And as far as I can tell, it's probably one of the most stable ways to rush out giants, because you're actually going to maintain a bit of board presence before the giants actually come out, whereas a lot of the giant decks tend to forgo the board presence in the early game to get the giants out as early as possible. This goes the other way around, and it works really well. You generally don't take much damage either, so at the moment this is probably my favourite giant deck. If you test it out, let me know how it goes. I've been Asky here for Nerf TV. Thank you all for watching.